From the crucial calls answered by 911 operators to the life-saving actions of police, fire, and EMS workers, maintaining mental stability both on the job and outside of it is paramount. In fact, research suggests that even brief mindfulness practices can lead to a significant reduction in stress and improved focus, with one study showing a 20% decrease in perceived stress levels among participants who engaged in regular short meditation sessions. So this week, I'm going to share mindfulness techniques and tools tailored for those that work in high-stakes scenarios on a daily basis, you, the first responder. Now that you know what this episode is about, let's reaffirm our why for listening to the 7 Pillars podcast. You're here because you know something needs to shift. You've tried willpower, you've set goals, but what you need now is a system, and that's what we're building, one pillar at a time. This is the 7 Pillars podcast. I'm Kevin Pinnell. Let's get to work. So I'm going to start many episodes with a quote, some from the book, The Stability Equation, that I wrote. This one is from there and from someone that I know, that I've learned from, that I've been fortunate to interview and be interviewed by, Kim Colgrove, the author of Mindfulness for Warriors, who says, "For those who answer the call, the practice of mindfulness is not a luxury, but a vital tool to navigate the intensity, process the impact, and return to each moment with renewed presence." Right? Because sometimes we return to those moments, whether we're locked up in a struggle with a bad guy, or we're on a scene and we see blood and guts, and maybe it's our first time, maybe it's our 500th time, and just our brain for some reason gets overwhelmed, because that's what brains do. So this mindfulness practice, this meditation, these tools that we'll talk about, that I'll share today, that I've used and that have been very helpful, and many others more so are using, and not just hiding things in the back, which I'll touch on like we used to in first responders, just, oh no, let's sweep it under the rug. They really help us stay present in the moment, and when we're not at work, they help us not just keep replaying those scenes over and over in our head. So let's jump into these techniques that both I learned from Kim's book, from my own research, and from repetition, right? Just like getting good at assessing a patient requires reps, getting good at shooting requires reps, so does becoming more mindful. So we're going to talk about how we can cultivate inner stillness through regular meditation, right? So bulletproof wearing, fire engine driving, patient triaging, or verbally triaging first responders have traditionally been open, right? About sitting still in a quiet place, taking note of how their bodies feel, or counting breaths for 5 or 10 minutes a day, right? It just hasn't happened. It's happened more in the past, I'd say 5-10 years perhaps, as folks have opened up and more peer support groups exist, not just, therapists and psychiatrists and all those kind of folks. So instead, dark humor, traditionally, right? Tons of coffee, lots of food, some weights, maybe holding an emotion have by and large been the order of the day. But that order should go away, the way of the dodo, right? Holding in bad shit in our minds has led to many folks to unalive themselves. So let's not do that. Let's help folks not do that. After my panic attack, I dove into Kim Colgrove's book, Mindfulness for Warriors. And that's when I started using the Headspace app, no affiliation, on a regular basis, daily, 10 minutes a day. I would just do it, set aside time, get up and go do it. And then after a few weeks, I could feel my ability to calm myself down, whether I woke up at night, thinking of something, or uncomfortable, or during the day. But that sitting outside, that sitting in wherever you're going to sit, but sitting still for 5 to 10 minutes. I did 10 minutes, sometimes longer, but 10 for me is a sweet spot. That's what I recommend. It wasn't perfect for sure, and I couldn't shut off all the anxious feelings or the memories, but I got better at doing that. And they also got much better, and this connects to pillar 6, sleep, at being able to get myself back to sleep because I was more mindful, because this meditation essentially has you make yourself more still. Right, but I also combined it with grounding techniques, which I'll touch on as well, which are some of those acute tools, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the tapping, other methods. But this meditation, this regular practice built my skills up, just like, again, it builds our skills for pulling hose if we practice that every week, or, you all get it. The other thing in this cultivating stillness and regular meditation is explore the guided meditation specifically designed for stress reduction of first responders, right? Because these can provide structure for you, right? So there's organization. So Kim Colgrove's organization, Pause First Academy, is a great place to start, right? So Headspace is good. It's for the general public. For Pause First Academy, it's totally focused on first responders, military people, right? And they offer free courses and tools, so go check it out. I also recommend the Responder Strong organization that was started by Rhonda Kelly. She's a former firefighter paramedic from Aurora Fire Department. And then she was out in Alaska and things like that. And I had her on the People Process Progress podcast a few years ago. And now it's the All Clear Foundation, but they also provide free tools, guided self-help tools, and they're very helpful. So Pause First Academy, you'll get a lot of great mindfulness, and Responder Strong, which has some mindfulness and also focuses on kind of the whole of your well-being, right? But you have to cultivate this. You have to train on it, just like you train on any other skill. And that leads me to this next tip and this next guidance for being more mindful as a first responder is build resilience through regular movement. Right, first responders should be in shape, period. Whether you sit in a patrol car and have to go from 0 to 100, which happens, right? Or you're going hands-on with somebody, or if you're pulling 4 or 5 inch hose, right, in full turnout gear as a firefighter, whether you're carrying a patient in a stair chair, or even if you're sitting, dealing verbally with folks in a 911 center facing emergencies, being physically active is a must, and it will help your mental health. Right? For more field-oriented first responders, I think overall fitness is a matter of life and death, right? If you can't lift your buddy, if you can't struggle with that person that's coming after you, right? Untrained police can't fight as well. Firefighters will breathe up all their air. EMTs and paramedics will have to call for the lift assist for a 150-pound female if they don't regularly weight train, and you shouldn't have to for someone like that, right? For the dispatchers, for our brethren there, getting up and moving on a regular basis is critical because you're so sedentary. You have to be you're there for the public. So be there for yourselves, right? And exercising outside of work, it not only protects against sitting so much, right? It also helps you burn through the traumas and the feelings that are going to be stuck in your head and in your body and the trauma of the job, right? Like body keeps the score. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk talks about that the traumas don't go away. They're stuck in your body somewhere. And especially if you're sitting still and then you're not being active, you're not going to burn them out. Right. And many say the key is to find something you enjoy, I'll say, as far as movement and exercise. And I believe this partially to help you get started. But I also say that you're not going to enjoy every workout. Right. When I decide to do 100 burpees with a goal of completing them all in under 10 minutes, I know it's going to be awful. I'll get anxious because I can't breathe and I'll be sore later that day and maybe the next day. Right. As Jocko Willink says, good. Because I know I've pushed when no one else has and that I'm improving my health. So start with something you like that you think you'll stick with, but then you got to let yourself forge your mind into something that can adapt to any workout style so you can maximize your fitness, right? And that means what I found helpful, and I believe a lot of other fitness pros talk about, is variance, right? Variety. Like weightlift, do some yoga, do some kettlebells, do some body weight, walk, run, and more. And if you don't know where to start, go to onit.com, look up CrossFit, go to my Pinel 5 Fit YouTube channel. You'll get ideas of workouts there. And then if you're not comfortable using the equipment, go to a gym, right? Ask your friend who has a garage gym, something with somebody that can show you the basic movements that you can get involved in. But you can very much build mental resilience through movement, and it makes a huge difference. The other thing is, and this is something first responders are very familiar with, is visualization and practice to reduce, right, or to be more mindful, I guess I'll say, to reduce, I'll say, the stress and freezing up and worrying about things when you're on the call, but also to increase your proficiency is, if you're a first responder, typically you've been through an academy, right, or you've taken multiple classes or both. So I think we can agree largely a lot of what's in the classroom is very good base knowledge. And even on the training ground, when you walk through things, it's not quite the same as on a real call. It's not the same sight and smells and sounds and feel. But the great thing in 2025 is training and simulation, I'll say simulation later, has come a long way in the past few decades, right? So kudos to our training officers out there. Thank you for all the work you put in. I say this to say that any training completed should be taken seriously and made as real as possible. And we should all know that. But sometimes the training is a weak walkthrough of stuff and it doesn't make people better and we check a box so we get grant money. And that's not the way, right? So the most realistic training that I've gone through is the Tactical Combat Casualty Care or TCCC course, where we use simunition, which means blanks. So it sounds like a real gunshot, just nothing comes out. We had excellent moulage. That's that makeup that looks like blood or guts or whatever you're trying to simulate, right? On casualties. And the casualties, the victims, the actors and actresses screamed like real victims. And there was a real element of danger. So with our gunmen, right, who had real weapons with blanks. And what that does is you see your buddy go down and you're like, oh, to run out there and get him, boom, you're dead. and they shoot at you, right, with ammunition. You're like, crap. So you learn these tough lessons. So this training provided immediate consequences and with very realistic element of gunshots and moaning from the suffering victim. So for you in a practice environment, you're stressed. So then when you get to the real world, you're a little less stressed. There's always that element of, oh, this is real now. But the training you do at a high level is critical, right? And not every drill or exercise needs to use that many resources. You know, it's expensive to put those on. It's time intensive. It's worth it. But you can do a lot of really good training, right? Like it should take us to the edge though of our capabilities. Quick example is, you know, for cops, grappling training, right? You don't really need hardly anything. You just need somebody that's maybe doing jiu-jitsu or wrestling or a similar grappling, martial art, judo, and they work with you, and you're going to get pretty instant feedback, right? So this helps us not be so stressed when we pull up on a call on the street or pick up the phone with someone on their worst day. The other tip or the other technique to sharpen your skills is that visualization piece, right? So in addition to that muscle memory of doing, visualization is an amazing tool. You hear about athletes do that all the time, and I'm sure it's talked about or should be. So if you're training someone new or you're someone trying to develop your skills, I know for me, when I was a volunteer firefighter, I was an engine driver. So when a call came in, I immediately started to visualize, how am I going to get there? Where's the hydrant? And you don't know everywhere, but you start to know your district a lot better, right? Which hose would I pull to wrap the hydrant? How far will I pull up to the residence of business? Where am I going to break the hose? And on and on. And if you visualize and walk yourself through that on your way to the call, then when you get there, you're that much closer. And bonus, if you do it well before a call comes in or in your downtime, you're not just in the recliner, you're not just in your squad car or the ambulance on post or somewhere else, but you're talking and walking through and looking at maps. You're putting in the work to your craft to get better. It's just going to make you better. So your skills are sharpened and you're not so stressed out, right? It's invaluable. And for me, I was lucky it worked because my leaders took the time to help me get up to speed and push me to do that. So exercise and training, the visualization, right, gave me the mind state that I'd already done it, even though I hadn't or had, but in this instance, you know, in this call in particular. So when I pulled up, I was ready. Not always perfect, but, you know, not every call or any call really goes perfect. So early on in training and when you're released, practice with that visualization often. The other thing is what I touched on early, and that means to promote well-being by expressing thoughts and feelings. And in the first responder world, that's a tough one, right? It's, again, very different world than it was decades ago. I started as a volunteer firefighter when I was 18 and 51 now. It was a long time ago. Took a break, came back to it when I was in my 30s. And it kind of changed as far as the mental health piece. And then particularly, like I said, in the last 5 or 10 years, it's for sure changed where it should be more open. And gone are the days, or should be, of we don't talk about it or I'm fine. And it's perfectly okay not to be okay, right? But not to not ask for help. And isolation and the numbing of your mind and unprocessed trauma is not good. I mentioned that earlier. So friends and teammates, I will share, are great. And many will listen. Many won't know how to help. And some won't be comfortable with what you share or the thought of sharing themselves. So that's the sticky part, right? It's who we lean on, who we trust, who we love, who we put our lives on the line with. But they're not also professionals of dealing with this, right? It's worth seeking support from counselors, right, who specialize in this, particularly if you're thinking about self-harm, but even if you're not, because that's their whole job, right? So in addition to some coping mechanisms, I'll say, and I'm not a professional either, that I found helpful in the book, The Stability Equation, I've talked about here on the podcast so far, the professionals have other tools, right? They have other healthy coping mechanisms. It's a total safe space. It's just you and that person. It's not you and your buddy, and then it's going to carry over or, you know, make something awkward as somebody you talk about. So in addition to the pros, though, I will say the peer support groups these days for first responders are way more evolved. It's not just someone that I showed up with and they don't have any training either, but they're going to listen. It's they get training in crisis intervention and some of these coping techniques and longer term tools for you to process, right? So if you have a peer support group, reach out to them as well and try and get involved with them. And they can also help you determine, you know, you need to go to Dr. So-and-so, someone that's a higher level, or you find these coping mechanisms and they actually work. So as we wind this episode down, I'm going to share, you know, I've seen some horrible shit just like you all, right? I've seen dead people of all ages. I've seen the transition of people from breathing to not, some in horrific ways. The human mind is very, very resilient, right? At some point, though, our mind gets full. The attic full of horror we've hidden away exceed maximum capacity. And this is when we get into crisis. And so we don't want to wait till then, right? So let's use these lessons from today's episode to reduce the pressure on our souls and start to unpack the process of overflowing that mental attic, right? So let's cultivate that inner stillness as we can through some meditation. Let's get regular movement to burn off nervous and traumatic energy and everything else that you're feeling that's stressing you out. Let's practice regularly and visualize so we're sharpening our skills. So that's one less thing we have to worry about in this world of worry that first responders have. And let's be comfortable for ourselves and for those maybe we lead, letting them know that it's okay to express our feelings and that it's okay to then get help if we need to express that to somebody of a higher level that has more skills. Right? So how can you start doing all this? If you're lost or having thoughts of self-harm, I want you to call 911 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Right? If you have unprocessed trauma, consider starting a journaling practice. Just write what you're thinking about in a private notebook, right? Don't think, just write. Kind of helps offload. It's a bit cathartic, as they say, right? To get that out of your brain. Right? To help you start building the tools, try like a brief mindfulness exercise before your next shift, like the 5-4-3-2-1 or tapping grounding technique. And if you want to know what those are, go to peopleprocessprogress.com and there's a free field guide there. I've got all these techniques in them. Or during downtime at the station, lunch, maybe sneak in a 5 to 10 minute meditation session. You can get the Headspace app. You don't have to though. You can go on YouTube and do like meditation session. They also have those from Headspace on there, but they're free. They're just out there. It's something to help you guide yourself. Again, in the guide that's on the peopleprocessprogress.com website, I have a simple outline you can follow. So try these and then notice any shifts in your focus or stress level. Right? When you proactively manage something that is really negatively affecting you, it starts to negatively affect you less. Right? And you can do these things and you can do them afraid, and you can do them nervous, and you can do them anxious, because the point is to start wearing away at those bad feelings and give yourself some more good. And these are not fixes. They're going to fix you forever or make you never be anxious or never think about those horrible things anymore. I can still picture, the playlist of people I've lost, the horrible things I've seen. But through using these tools I mentioned today and putting the time into myself and talking with others, I'm able to better deal with them. And I believe you will too. I mentioned the 7 Pillars Field Guide that's on the peopleprocessprogress.com website. I also have a new tool there. So if you're not sure which pillar you should work on, and again, those 7 pillars are ownership, mindfulness, movement, boundaries, connection, sleep, and faith. These are 7 areas I dove into in a super tough part of my life, and they really help pull myself up with help from other folks as well. But again, you got to put the work in. There's an assessment. So it's a 7 pillars pathfinder, which means you can do a quick one that says, I feel this way today, and it'll tell you the pillar, which is pretty obvious. Or you can do a longer one where you answer about 4 questions each pillar, and it'll take the results of that and say, hey, you should focus on this pillar. And the next iteration that I'm going to include is the tips right with your answers, figuring out the coding on that. But in the meantime, if you get a certain answer, pair it with the free guide that's on the website, and there you go. And you'll be able to start working on something, whether it's taking more ownership or improving your sleep pattern or setting boundaries or breaking your own boundaries. So I really hope that you use those tools. Again, you can follow me on X and Instagram at Pennell, Pannellkg. I've got the Pennell 5 Fitness Club YouTube channel, which we just crossed 600,000 views, which I really appreciate everybody taking the time to get some fitness tips, 15 to 30 seconds at a time, some cold plunge, some jiu-jitsu after action reports. You can get the full Stability Equation book on Amazon. You can get that through the People Process Progress website as well. Just goes to the Amazon page, a little shortcut there. So really, if you go to peopleprocessprogress.com, you get all the connections. Thank you to everyone that listened to this, particularly if you are a brother or sister first responder. I appreciate your service, your time, and please keep getting after it for yourself, because we know you're going to keep getting after it for those in the world around you. Stay safe out there, everybody. Godspeed. Thanks for listening to the 7 Pillars podcast. If today's episode gave you something to think about or act on, consider sharing it with someone else walking their own path. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss what's next. You can connect with me and follow on X and Instagram at Pannellkg, Pannellkg. I'm also on LinkedIn. In the meantime, own your mind, move your body, anchor your spirit, and I'll see you next time. Godspeed, y'all.